Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. London Scotland Yard said the body of 30-year-old Bon Scott was found by a friend who had left him in the car hours earlier. Music. Police in London say the lead singer of the rock band AC/DC was found dead last night in a parked car in South. London.Scotland Yard said the body of 30-year-old Bon Scott. Bon Scott wasn't just a drunk victim. The truth hidden for more than 40 years has finally been told. And it is the complete opposite of what people once thought. The lead singer of AC/DC died in a situation that everyone knew about but never talked about. Witnesses went away, evidence was never looked at, and a bunch of bad decisions led to an ending sadder than any rock song he ever wrote. On the 18th of February 1980, Bon Scott left his apartment in Ashley Court, Victoria, London for the Music Machine nightclub in Camden, a popular spot of the London rock scene at the time. On this final evening, Scott was with Alistair Canier, someone he knew in the British rock scene who would later become a main person in the events surrounding his death. According to medical papers, Bon Scott had drunk alcohol with way more than the legal limit, but the final medical report said the cause of death was death by accident without saying any other substance besides alcohol. The report mentioned breathing problems due to throw up while he was unconscious, which happened in a cold, closed space while he was lying still in the car. The most important detail in the case is that Alistair Canier took Bon Scott to his apartment at 67 Overhill Road, East Dulwich, at around 3 in the morning on the 19th of February. Instead of taking Scott into the house, Canier left him in his Renault 5, covered him with a blanket and left a note. At around 7:45 at night that same day, Bon Scott was confirmed dead at King's College Hospital. Stories from people there that night were later collected from several sources. Colin Burgess, former drummer for AC/DC, said he saw Scott late in the evening and that he did not look drunk at the time. Pete Way, a member of the band UFO, said Bon Scott had been at their apartment with Alistair Canier before they went to the club and said he was awake and talking. Paul Chapman, another musician who was there that night, said Scott had been drinking whiskey, but not enough to lose control. Another person who showed up at the final location was Zena Cooley, the wife of Peter Perret, who said that she was with Alistair Canier and Bon Scott at the Overhill Road apartment. Zena Cooley said, "I did not personally see Scott using heroin, but Alistair and Silver did use it that night." This detail is really important in figuring out the cause of death, because according to medical sources, mixing alcohol and heroin can cause breathing to stop, heart attack, or suddenly passing out. According to music expert Jesse Frink, author of Bond: The Last Highway, Bon Scott's actual time of death was probably earlier than officially reported. Frink points to multiple people in the London rock scene who said that Scott had been unconscious since the morning of the 19th, and that waiting too long to get him to the hospital was a key reason for his death. Another detail that has come out in the papers is who Alistair Canier really was. For years after Bon Scott's death, Canier stayed out of sight and wouldn't talk to the press. It wasn't until 2005 that he sent an email to a European rock magazine saying, "I was with Bon that night. We were both on drugs." This response made stronger the theory that independent investigations had. Bon Scott may have taken heroin before passing out in the car. At the time he was found, Bon Scott showed no signs of being hurt. His clothes were fine. His bag had several drafts of song words and a wool scarf. The Renault showed no signs of break-in or damage. His overall body condition was said to be normal except for his cold body, loss of reflexes, and signs of throat blockage due to throwing up. The argument is not only about the cause of death, but also about the fact that substances other than alcohol were not properly tested. The medical examiner's report did not include a full test for opioids, morphine, or heroin types, which led to the chance of drug mixing being ignored. Still, circumstantial evidence, testimony from people at the scene, and industry agreement suggests that this possibility cannot be ruled out. The reason Bon Scott was left in the car for almost 16 hours without medical help continues to be a key factor. The fact that an unconscious person was left in the cold, in the front seat of a car without any quick action by the person with him, is a sign of serious carelessness. Alistair Canier did not contact the police or medical services until Scott was completely unconscious, and this played a key role in his death. Right after Bon Scott's death, the entire media and funeral process was done in a short and quiet way. The body was flown back to Australia and buried in Fremantle Cemetery, Western Australia, where his family had lived since the 1950s. The funeral was short and closed to the world press. Only a small number of close friends in the music industry were allowed to come. Information given to the outside world waist-tightly controlled, with the focus one celebrating the music rather than the cause of death. At the time, AC/DC was in a changing time between two major markets, Europe and North America. The band had just gotten commercial success with Highway to Hell, and the loss of its lead singer could have had a direct impact on deals, sponsorship, and touring plans around the world. In that situation, the decision not to release specific details about Scott's death was seen as part of a plan to keep the stability of the music brand. Just 3 weeks after Scott's death, the band held tryouts to find their placement. The decision to work with Brian Johnson came after a short discussion between the founding members and manager Peter Mensch. Johnson had been the lead singer of the Geordie Band and was someone Scott had mentioned in a 1974 interview. The choice was made quickly, without much publicity, and without any official word from Scott's family. Bon Scott's entire unreleased recordings before February 1980 stayed unreleased for more than 2 decades. Demo versions for Back in Black, which Scott is said to have written, were left out of official release. His personal stuff was given to his family's legal representatives, but most of the material was stored at his management company's headquarters and not put on computer until the 2010s. Since 2000, Bon Scott's image, music, and name rights have been given to the legal estate headed by John Jackson. This is when the legacy protection campaign got stronger. All products from bootleg tapes to approved memory publications have been asked to be removed from distribution systems. The official Bon Scott website has been running since 2023, using old photos collected from fans, but does not mention the events of 1980 in detail. The lack of official information did not affect the release of AC/DC's products. In 1980, the band released Back in Black, an album that sold over 50 million copies, becoming one of the best-selling albums in history. There was no image or tribute to Bon Scott on the back cover of the album. At concerts promoting the album, Scott's name was barely mentioned in the stage material. The entire process of handling Bon Scott's estate, copyrights and information since his death has been highly controlled. The limited media and public access has not been by accident, but rather a planned part of a plan to preserve the artist's image, music brand, and business activities connected with AC/DC. Anything that could possibly mess with or change public perception of the cause of his death has been left out from the official information flow. Voice and Darkness. Ronald Belelford. Bon Scott was born in 1946 in Forfar, Scotland, to a working-class family who moved to Australia in 1952. He spent his early years in Fremantle, Western Australia, where he developed his musical roots, his rebellious attitude, and his non-linear approach to life, traits that would later define his style. In a post-World War II Anglo-American culture, Scott joined local bands as a drummer and backup singer. In 1967, he moved into lead singing with the Valentines, a pop rock group based mostly in Adelaide. During 1967-1970, the Valentines got moderate regional popularity, but began to struggle from the pressure of a more hardcore music market. The band had an image crisis after a marijuana incident, which led to their breakup. Bon Scott then joined the experimental progressive rock band Fraternity, touring the UK and using the stage name Fang. In some opening shows for larger groups such as Status Quo, Fraternity broke up in 1973 after failing to make a presence in the European market. During his time with his earlier bands, Scott developed deep personal relationships, including 2 important ones: Irene Thornton, his common-law wife from 1972 to 1977, and Margaret Silver Smith, a close friend with connections to the London Underground. Both relationships were joined by wild drug and alcoholics. Irene Thornton wrote in her 2014 memoir that Scott drank 2 to 3 bottles of whiskey a day while with the Fraternity. Margaret Smith, who came back into his life in London in 1979, had a history of heroin use and had been involved in the selling of the drug to artists. Signs of hard drug use appeared around 1975, when AC/DC were building their early image in Australia. A reported incident in Melbourne that year saw Scott taken to the hospital in serious shock after consuming a mixture of alcohol and stimulants, although the cause was never officially released. Later sources confirmed the presence of opioids in his medical records. His health continued to get worse from time to time from that point on, especially during AC/DC's tours around the world from 1976 to 1979. Bon Scott's personal life was rarely separated from his musical career. His song words often had references to his real-life mental state, including feelings of not caring, pessimism, and a habit of seeking comfort through drug use. The song Down Payment Blues from the album Power Age, 1978, is a great example of Scott's treatment of his personal life through funny musical imagery that clearly showed his state of mental tiredness. Off stage, Scott kept correspondence with some of his old friends in Australia and Scotland, often using insider slang and language that suggested his mental instability. Overall, Bon Scott was an artist who had two parallel frames of reference: a rock icon with a strong stage image and an individual who often struggled with mental instability, drug abuse, and isolation. These factors worked at the same time and continuously, leading to a chain of consequences that were impossible to separate from his eventual death. A complete understanding of Bon Scott before 1980 is necessary to understanding what really happened next. Road to Hell. Bon Scott joined AC/DC in 1974, as the band was in the process of launching their home market and forming their core lineup. The young brothers Angus and Malcolm were looking for a good singer to move the band's music towards hard rock rather than the old glam rock style. The decision to replace Dave Evans with Scott was made after a tryout in Adelaide and was quickly agreed upon internally. Scott's appointment as AC/DC's lead singer was not just a personnel change, but also a big turning point in the band's musical structure, image, and brand message. The first album released with Bon Scott was High Voltage 1975, the Australian version, with production help from George Young and Harry Vander. The album laid the foundations for what would become an iconic style: heavy riff structures, direct vocals, and fast tempos. Scott took on the role of full-time lyric writer from this period, with the songs being clearly narrative, reflecting personal experiences of street life, social unrest, and rebellion against traditional moral standards. During the period from 1975 to 1979, AC/DC released the albums TNT, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, Let There Be Rock, Power Ridge, and Highway to Hell. Each of these albums showed Scott's increasing influence in shaping the musical message. His phrases, images, and song words often dealt with mental breakdown, deviance, and a refusal to follow conventional social norms. Ride On from Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap 1976 is considered to be the most expressive of Scott's narrative nature, with its slow tempo, deep vocals, and thoughtful lyrics in stark contrast to the rest of the album. Within AC/DC, Bon Scott was the only non-blood relative and the only individual without a corporate contract before joining the group. This made his status in Theban dependent almost entirely on performance and commercial image. The songwriting process worked on a hierarchical basis. The young brothers kept musical control. Scott was responsible for lyrics, while management handled contractual and branding issues. The other members did not participate in the central songwriting process. The end of 1979 saw AC/DC at their peak. Highway to Hell. The first album with producer Robert John Mutt Lang reached the top 20 in the United States and expanded its reach in Europe. During the production of the album, Bon Scott began to show signs of physical and mental tiredness. The strict recording schedule in England, combined with the intense touring schedule, increased his dependence on alcohol and mind-altering drugs. According to internal papers from his record label, Scott cancelled several sessions in November 1979, citing exhaustion, and at one point was soonable to complete the recording to his desired sound standards. By February 1980, at the time of the incident, Bon Scott no longer had personal control over any aspect of the band's commercial operations. All rights to his image, lyrics and recordings were in the hands of his management company and record label. His death at a time when the band was preparing for a global expansion left a huge gap in terms of personnel, but also created the conditions for a complete restructuring of the media model in which Scott's image was kept in a glorified state, and his actual role was removed from the later production process. By the end of 1980, AC/DC had moved on to a new structure, new personnel, and no further official statements were made about Bon Scott's lyrical contributions between November 1979 and February 1980. This meant that his role in the transition to Back in Black ended up being left unaccounted for in the official database. This absence was not because of neglect, but rather a choice made very early on. Decoded, not beautiful, information, gathered from individuals who were in Bon Scott's social circle in London before February 1980 suggests that Heroin use happened with considerable frequency within a narrow circle involving individuals connected with the contemporary rock scene. The names of individuals such as Zena Cooley, Margaret Silver Smith, and Alistair Stakana appear in multiple independent sources directly linked to the events surrounding Scott's death. According to the data put together during the independent investigation and the after-death examination, Bon Scott had exposure again to heroin after a long period of mainly alcohol and mind-altering drug use. During music gatherings in Camden and Dulwich, the circulation of white heroin, commonly known as China White, was done by some people with access to distribution sources in the Soho area. Internal papers recorded a number of exchanges between Scott and individuals in the group about dosage and preparation, suggesting the presence of this substance in daily life in the days leading up to his death. Zena Cooley's testimony in a recorded conversation in 2022 states, Bon was present when the heroin was used. He asked about the usage and said he needed something strong to maintain the high. This data matches the body response sequence recorded in the King's College Hospital records after Scott was taken to the emergency room. Although the official autopsy report only mentions alcohol, there is no sign that extensive testing was done to rule out other classes of depressants. Alistair Stakana's account was also captured in an email sent to the organizers of an independent music conference in 2005. In the excerpt, which was quoted in a research paper published by Jesse Frink, Conner wrote, "We were drinking more than usual that day. Bon was still smiling, but he looked tired. I think he just needed to sleep." This statement, in the context of other witnesses who reported increased drug use in the final hours, was taken as confirmation that Scott had been exposed to an unsafe dose of depressants. The analysis from 2017 to 2025 systematically determined that Bon Scott's death was not a single death due to loss of control of alcohol, but a direct result of the at the same time use of multiple central nervous system depressants in conditions without medical supervision, in the presence of a full range of bad external factors. The structure of the cause of death has been figured out. The content of this conclusion, if viewed from the perspective of making the public figure perfect, clearly does not bring a sense of relief. More than 4 decades on, the silence surrounding Bon Scott's death has been replaced by facts, by testimony, by the once hidden truth. No longer the immortal figure on stage, Bon Scott now appears as a real person, talented, unstable, and ultimately defeated in circumstances that could have been different. If you feel this story needs to be shared, please share this video, subscribe to make sure you don't miss the next profile, and leave a comment if you have anything to say about this never so pleasant journey.